We are working on lesson 2-6, rules for multiplication, and a lot of this stuff you know, but we're going to put some properties with it, so let's pay attention. We'll start with the identity property. It just tells us that when I multiply something through by 1, the same comes out. So when I ask you for the multiplicative identity, remember that anything times 1 is itself. So 3 times 1 is 3. So the multiplicative identity is 1. Earlier this year, we learned the additive identity. Do you guys remember the additive identity? The additive identity is what 5 plus what number gives me identical out, and that would be 0. So the additive identity is 0. Multiplicative identity is 1. Our next is the multiplicative property of 0, which tells us whenever I multiply something through by 0, it's 0. Anything times 0 is 0. A times 0 is 0. 0 times a is 0. 5 times 0 is 0. 3 times 0 is 0. All right, moving on to the multiplicative property of -1. Notice that if a is multiplied by -1, it becomes a negative a. So what this is saying is anytime I multiply something by -1, the opposite comes out. So -3 times -1 is +3. 5 times -1 is -5. The property of opposites is telling us, we don't use this one as much as the others, but it is telling us the property of opposites and products, product means to multiply, is telling us that negative a times b is negative ab. A times negative b is negative ab. But remember, when I multiply two negatives, I get a positive. Most of you guys know that. Let's move on to some more rules. If two numbers have the same sign, their product is positive. If two numbers have different signs, their product is negative. So let's try a couple of these. A positive times a positive, and number 1 is a positive. Number 2, a negative times a positive is negative. Number 3, a negative times a negative is positive. How'd you do? Now, when I look at the next section, I like to say, ooh, positive, positive, negative. There is only one negative, therefore I know the answer will be negative. And the reason why I do it that way is that if there are an odd number of negatives, the answer will be negative. Which means if there is an even number of negatives, the answer will be positive. So they're really just asking us if it will be positive, negative, or 0. In this case, it will be negative. In this case, we have this 0 here, which tells us the multiplicative property of 0 says anything times 0 is 0. And notice on number 6, I have 2 negatives. If I have an even number of negatives, the answer will be positive. All right, let's look at number 9. I'm kind of skipping around for time's sake. If I take a -6 and distribute it through, -6 times positive a is -6a. -6 times -5b is positive 30b. On the next one, notice I have to distribute the -3. A lot of you guys like to show that add a negative. That's fine. I'm going to take the negative through. 5r minus 6r, a -3 and a -9 is a positive 27. And when I add, I get -r plus 27. One thing I want you to notice is how these are written with the variable first. In this case, on the orange, it goes in alphabetical order. In this case, in the pink, the variable and then the constant, this number 27 is called the constant. Notice number 11 is star circle highlighted. So obviously we're going to see something like this again. Okay. So the first thing that I want to do is write negative 0.8c plus 4.1h. And notice that a negative would be positive. So we're adding 3.2c. So remember, when I solve this, I have to actually subtract. Now I know these are decimals, a little different. If you have to write it out to solve it. So when I solve it, I know because the 3.2 is a larger absolute value, I know that 3.2c minus 0.8 is 2.4c plus 4.1h. And again, we're back in alphabetical order, CH. That's not going to be a game breaker when you're taking a test and writing this out for me, but just so you know how you're usually going to see it solved in mathematics. All right, last one. Ooh, this kind of brings us back to our lesson the other day. What do you suppose I'm going to do if I see a 9 and a 9 multiplied by 9? I'm going to use what we call factoring that 9 out, and I have left a negative 34 plus 18 minus 4. And I know negative 34 and negative 4 is negative 38. So I'm going to write this as negative 38 plus 18, and maybe I can solve this very quickly. And negative 38 plus 18 is negative 20. And this makes it a whole lot easier to get to our answer than multiplying them all and adding them separately. A lot less mistakes. Great job.